6x7, arguably the most satisfying medium format size out there, and one that brings with it a handful of fine cameras and optics to choose from. For me, the iconic Pentax 672 is what captured both my heart and my wallet. But that was only after heavy debate between its competitors, the RZ67 and the Mamiya 7. The Pentax 6.7 is a classic camera that was and still is very popular today. But it's also a system that brings with it the stereotype of being a raw and gigantic beast of a setup, with people often joking that you'll need to hit the gym for weeks just to be able to even handle this thing. Now, I know that a lot of that is just people over-exaggerating and having some fun with things, but that stereotype did have an impact on me when I was trying to decide which system to invest in. And I'm sure that there's others out there that have felt the same way. Instead of talking about the specs and details of the Pentax, I want to talk about why I chose to go with the 6.7 II and my opinions regarding the camera after using it now for a couple of months. I'm hoping that this will help anyone looking to invest in the system that is curious about the usability. So I want to start by talking about why I chose the Pentax over the Mamiyas. The Mamiya 7 is a rangefinder style of camera, and as I've mentioned before, I prefer a SLR over a rangefinder, so the Mamiya 7 was out. I did think long and hard about the RZ67. I really like the fact that it has interchangeable backs that also rotate, and for me, that's probably the biggest benefit over the Pentax. But in the end, the SLR style ergonomics of the 6.7 are what won me over. With all three of these cameras, lens quality is almost a wash. Sure, some lenses are going to be a bit better than others, with the Mamiya 7s often being regarded as some of the best optics ever created. But for the most part, all three systems aren't going to have any limitations when it comes to lens quality and performance. I chose to go with the 6.7 II over the earlier models of this camera. The 6.7 II was the last version that Pentax released, and it was also the one that saw the most significant changes. All three variants before this camera were all very similar, and you really can't go wrong with any of them. On the 6.7 II, the biggest and most important change for me was the addition of this right-hand grip on the side of the camera. The 6.7 II is definitely a pricier camera than the earlier versions, coming in anywhere around $1,500 to $2,000 US for the body, compared to about $300 to $1,000 for earlier versions. But the grip was an absolute deal breaker for me. For my preferences, it changes the usability of the camera in a big way. With the 6.7 II being a bit bulkier, it really does help secure it in your hand. But regardless of the size, I even prefer a grip on a 35mm camera. So moving on, I want to talk about the two biggest stereotypes surrounding this camera. The first one is the size and the weight, and the second one is the shutter slap and the sound. When it comes to the size, yes, it's a big camera, quite a lot bigger than a 35mm SLR. Most of the 6x7 offerings are, and in my opinion, it's just a reality that comes with shooting a larger negative. But by no means is it some arm-breaking beast that's going to leave you with sore muscles for an entire week. I really don't think that the weight of this camera is as big of a deal as it's made out to be. I think it all just comes down to choosing the right tool for the job and not expecting it to be something that it isn't. If you're traveling and have minimal room and need something incredibly compact, there's a good chance that none of the 6x7 offerings are going to work for you, except for maybe the Mamiya 7, depending on the circumstances. The second point to talk about is the shutter sound and also the slap of this camera. It's definitely a popular topic when discussing the Pentax. Seeing as this is a 6x7 film camera, the mirror box is quite a bit bigger than on a 35mm SLR. And because of that, the sound of the mirror and of the focal plane shutter is louder. How much louder? A bit. Honestly, that's the best way I can describe it. And it's not something that's really ever bothered me. I think I just expected this camera to be louder right from the start. And I actually think it sounds pretty awesome. When it comes to the shutter slap, there's long been debates, with both sides being quite convincing that the 6.7 either is or isn't affected by vibration coming from the mirror and the shutter. Some people say that this causes softness in images, and other people say that it doesn't. Welcome to the internet. All I can do is comment on this from my experience so far, and up until this point, I haven't noticed any effects of vibrations from the mirror or the shutter. My rule is that for handheld work, I don't shoot any slower than 1/125th. And for tripod work, I make sure I use a sturdy head and leg combo with the mirror up function and a cable release when necessary. Maybe in the future, I'll notice some of these vibrations from the shutter or the mirror, but up until this point, it hasn't been an issue for me. With those points out of the way, I want to talk briefly about why I love the 6.7 II. I really did like the Mamiya RZ, and I came close to buying it. I approach my 6.7 work different than I do for 35mm. For 6.7 film, more of my work is done on a tripod with less volume created. It's definitely a slower process and one that would be perfect for the RZ 6.7, especially with its interchangeable backs. But the fact that the Pentax gives me the ability to treat it like a 35mm SLR and walk about with similar ergonomics was a deal breaker. It's both the slowdown on a tripod camera and the walkabout shooting on the fly camera.